beforehand, huh? Hi, everybody. We are going to get started here. I know we're a little bit late, but sometimes oversleeping is the best thing in the world to do. So we're going to get started. Daryl, again, is on standby. He is going to be letting me know about your comments as I'm looking the other direction. Please feel free to ask any questions or say hi. I love all of you, and I'm glad that you're here with me today. Let's get painting. But first, I've got to fix my camera again because I messed it up so that I could say hi. Let's move this way a bit. Alright. My workspace has been changing a lot lately because I use the same space to work from home as I do to paint. So I've been moving things around, trying to kind of figure out what feels the most comfortable, and it really just does feel like it's a different angle and a different space and a different solution every week. But well, once I get this reorganization finished in this room like I'd like, well, it'll be a little bit less movement. So the painting that you guys have chosen has a big spotlight up in the corner. That kind of permits for light to come in, and it also creates quite a bit of flexibility on what you can do with a painting like this one. Light will allow for you to paint all of these pretty little shadows that you see on the border of what we will be using to inspire us today with all of the underwater plant life, but it also allow for you to use color if that's what you want to do, so that you can make this as plain and simple or as colorful as you would like for it to be. It is very, very permissive for all of that. So we're just going to go ahead. I'm going to take a piece of colored chalk so that I can outline the area on my canvas where I want that light to shine through. Generally, I would be advising that we do a full background together, all in a solid color. But when we have white going over that, that sometimes becomes a little bit difficult. So we're going to manage this just in a tiny little bit of a different way today. So I'm just going to kind of reserve the spot with a little kind of circle right in the middle. And really, this is just so that I don't go too dark in that area. I don't want that area to become so blue that the that white won't be as bright as it needs to be for this particular painting. And again, you do whatever you feel is going to work out better for you, but when I've done paintings like this with the light in the back in the past, leaving space for that brightness has always proven to be a good move for me. So I'm just going to take I'm actually going to take quite a bit of white today, because we're going to use quite a bit of it just in creating our first layer in this painting. So I'm going to take a generous amount of white here. And I'm also going to take a fair amount of blue. And this is mostly because we are going to be mixing that blue in little by little, and creating lots of different shades of blue. And I would advise don't get too much. You can always get more later. But you just don't want it to dry on your plate. And today I'm actually going to use a little bit of pre-made green just to save some time. But I feel like under the water you get a lot of different colors, and you get quite a bit of turquoise in there as well. As you can see, today we have a lot of painting visitors. Both Bester and Bunny have decided that they will make cameos during today's painting session because they love you too. Let's just hope that Bester doesn't try to drink my painting water because it's not going to taste good. So we're going to start off with um, a round-ended brush, which is usually our filbert. Um, our filbert we can use to kind of get a lot of paint in one space, or a lot of space, but it's going to help us use a large distribution. So I'm just going to kind of put it into that white paint, and I'm not going to erase that chalk outline I've done, but I'm going to color inside of it, and I'm going to prime it. If I do get stuff all over it, I want that white to really, really keep that spot bright. So we are going to just prime it so that when we are ready to use that space, it's ready to go, and it's got a nice little layer there to kind of let us know that's where the light is going to come through. So I already have a little bit of white on my brush, so I'm going to just um, kind of take a little bit of that white and set it aside. Here, I'll turn my palette here so you can see. There. I've separated this from the bigger blob of white, and I'm gonna create myself a little bit of blue just by touching the blue to it, just enough to get some on the corner there. We want to make a tinted white rather than a full-on mix here. And again, we don't want the color to just mix through. We want it to be nice and splotchy and colorful. So I'm just going to start kind of painting outward from the center and creating the grain and texture of that background. Usually we just kind of put the paint on by going up and down, left and right, whatever have you. But the grain of the painting should be coming from that lit center. And we want to start a little bit lighter and then gradually darken as we get towards the edge of the canvas. And just like anything else, this applies, paint to the edge of your canvas so that you don't have to frame it if you don't want to. But we are creating the light burst. And note, I'm not taking any more paint on my brush. Really, like I said, this is kind of like tantamount to sketching on the canvas. We are just laying a foundation right at the moment, so that we can figure out where everything else needs to go. So now I have this blue on my plate, and now I'm gonna add a little bit more blue to it. I'm gonna make it a little bit darker, and we're going to do the same thing. Only we're going to start out just a little bit further back because we are starting to darken in our shape. This kind of looks a little bit kind of like a blossoming flower at the moment. And you could use the same technique to make a canvas of a blossoming flower, just so you know. You'd probably get something that looks very beautiful. Kind of going about it the same way. All right. So now I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm actually going to take some of this blue that's on the plate and I'm going to move it to another space. And I'm going to take a little tiny bit of that green and I'm going to mix it in to kind of get a little bit of an aquamarine. But I also want it to be light, so just make sure that it doesn't get too dark or too mixed. And we're going to go back over that same area we were just in. I'm just going to add a little bit of color and texture. Hello, Beth. Thank you for joining us today. Keep going. Ah, the children are playing. Bester has developed this new thing lately where she will sneak up on Bonnie while she is sleeping and start grooming her, which is a sign of affection, actually, which is great because these cats don't get along that well. But as soon as Bunny wakes up, Bester does this thing where she looks at her like, I'm not doing anything, you know. So Bester's in the stage of, I love you, but I don't want you to know that I love you. All right. So our colors are nice and mingling. So we're going to now go a step further with that dark blue and just kind of add it to the blue we already have going. Again, you don't really want to mix too much. You want it to stay good and splotchy, because you want those colors to offset each other and make a nice contrast. So we're just going to keep going. We'll start again a little bit further out. And when you can get them in it, kind of try and blend your colors just a little bit, not a lot, because you don't want it to look too purposeful. But you can start making your colors a little bit more cohesive. And you can make these colors as dark or as light as you want. You can do the same technique with pinks and oranges, purples, and it will look quite lovely. I may do that again on my second run on this painting. But when I've never done a painting before, I try really hard to kind of stick with the example I have to work with because I'm kind of flying off the seat of my pants. So I don't want to trip myself up while I'm trying to guide you through your own experience. I don't know who made this painting, but it's really quite inspiring as a beginning painter for me to just kind of give it a try and see how it turns out. If you find any spots that you're not happy with because they seem uneven, just kind of go back over them a little bit. The key to any touch-up is just gentle strokes. Hi, Bunny. So now we're going to kind of go a little bit backwards. And just like I've done in the past, I'm going to lift the rest of my easel here because I'm going to hang and rest my painting on it so that I can get to the bottom. A lot of these easels in particular, like the ones that I have, there's a little screw in the back where you can elevate or drop the foot there. And I like to elevate it a little so I've got plenty of space to work with here at the bottom and plenty of space to let it dry here in a few minutes. I need a drink. Ginger beer, it is my favorite. It is non-alcoholic. It is just ginger ale with a stronger kick, and it is delicious. It's a beautiful day out. It's nice and sunny. And it doesn't inspire me to go out because it's still cold, but it does inspire me to have a ginger beer. So, we're going to start getting into this last layer, well, the bottom area of the painting, and I feel like it is the darkest part of the painting. So I am actually going to take just some straight blue and separate it a little bit. And I'm going to add a little bit of white just to give it a little bit of pliability in the color. And I'm going to add a decent amount of green, not a ton, not more than the blue, but I want to create this really pretty teal. And I'm going to start from the bottom and edges and meet the texture upward. Like, it is a turtle. We will have a flying turtle in the center. And one of the conversations that I was planning for today is if you don't want it to be a turtle, it does not have to be a turtle. It can be a starfish. It can be an octopus. I have a lot of friends out there that are super into octopi. It can be any animal that you want to put in this, but we will be doing the turtle today just for the guidance and instruction that I am only partially prepared to give you. So since I brought Bunny home, she has decided that she needs to be part of the majority of our painting experiences. And a lot of the time what she's trying to do really is just to steal my paintbrush. But as you can see, she is very happy to be here today as well. So at this point in the painting, I am doing what I call filling in the space. It is really just a matter of making sure that the canvas is fully populated. And just remember, we are actually going to paint over the majority of what we see around the edges. So the edges don't have to be particularly wonderful. But having that extra layer of paint below it, that primer underneath it, can be really, really handy in the translation of everything else that you put on it. we can kind of keep going. You give those kiddos a bunch of kisses for me, Betsita. All of them. Out of color, so I guess I better make some more. Don't get too caught up on the technique. It really doesn't matter that much. You want to make sure that you feel good while you're painting, that you're nice and relaxed. If you are tensed up and nervous about how this is going, you're doing it wrong. So the top of my canvas is kind of dry now, so I'm just going to kind of give it a good flip there, and I'm going to ensure that all of my edges are painted. And honestly speaking, probably most of these edges are going to turn black toward the end, so I'm not really sure if we should be bothering too much with it, but you know how I am. I have a system, I'm going to stick with it. So while that kind of takes its time to figure life out, I'm going to take a little touch of white to that lovely turquoise that we were just working with and just kind of tint it up a little bit. And I'm going to go back to filling in gaps. Because really we want it to mingle nicely. We want to have a nice fade. And my brush is getting a little bit dry too, so I want to wet those bristles a little. That's going to make them a little bit more malleable as well. Hmm. Take your time and be patient with your outcomes. One of the things that I like to say a lot when I'm teaching an in-person class is if you don't like it, keep going. Because really in the end, you may find that it was just, you just needed to give it a little bit of time for it to, your painting is growing up. You really want to get into those spaces where you can see the white canvas kind of poking through. It's important that we don't have any unpainted canvas, because you want your paint to kind of seal itself in the end. And acrylic paint is really good for that. Acrylic paint very rarely needs an extra layer of medium to preserve itself because it's basically plastic. But you want to make sure that you get as much as your canvas filled out with the stuff so that it just kind of self-preserves a little bit. And you can use medium um, to preserve, to further preserve. It's like an extra layer of clear coat that you can put on it. I'm not a fan, but you can. And the reason I'm not a fan is because I feel that sometimes they don't dry 100% clear, and they have either like a mattifying agent, um, or they can dry kind of like Elmer's glue. There's a little bit of a frost to it, and I think it dulls the brightness of the painting sometimes. So, but you can find those at any craft store, at any art store, and what you want is just clear medium. You can also use the clear medium, and I will advocate for this whenever you feel like you need it. If you have a canvas that is completely untreated or over treated, you can paint the canvas with clear medium, and it will give you a different texture to work with on the canvas. Also, I'm not a big advocate for using water to thin out your paintings, but I'm finding it actually quite useful for this particular one, just because I want the colors to blend a little bit more naturally. It does change the composition of your paint a little bit, so I don't know what it'll do to it in the long run, but you know, in terms of like how it's helping the the paint blend together, it is working quite effectively. It did. All right. My bottom is relatively dry, so I'm going to put this back down here, just because it does make things a lot easier to manage once it's sitting flat. Now I do also want to advise to not go over the same spot too many times, because then you're going to start creating those splotchy spots, because you'll start scraping the paint off, and we don't really want that either. So at some point you're going to have to decide to just leave it the way that it is. But like I said, we are going to come back and do more with these, especially the edge areas here shortly. And once it dries, you'll get another opportunity to go over those spaces as well. You can also go back and you can overlap with your lighter colors just to kind of keep the movement going. All right. So now that that's all kind of started, we're going to, well, I'm going to take care of this side here that I apparently didn't put any color on. There you go. So now we are going to, you can either clean out your brush really thoroughly, or you can get a brand new clean brush. It's up to whatever you want. I'm going to opt to just kind of clean up my brush really thoroughly. Because now I'm going to kind of go back into, I'm going to go back into that white. So I'm going to do like this because I want you to be able to see my palette throughout. And I'm going to take a little tiny bit of yellow, just a little bit. And this is going to be just to kind of give the light some dimension as well. And I'm going to keep it nice and separate from my colors, just because I don't want any of that green to get in there just yet, or that blue, because I want these colors to stay as pure as I can keep them while I work with them. So I'm going to take my clean brush and I'm going to separate some of that white, and I'm going to stick a little bit of yellow, and I'm going to tint it a little bit. I don't want a really, really bright yellow. I just want a kind of yellow white. Just a touch. And not completely mixed in either. So first I'm going to kind of go over that area that we separated. Just a touch, just a little. Just to kind of make sure that it's dominant. And the moisture in there is actually going to help us do the next step really well. So I'm going to press off as much paint as I can from my brush so that I don't have a whole lot of it on there. I do want some, just not a ton. I'm going to make sure that my brush is relatively flat, and I'm just going to start creating light beams through and through in the patterns in which we have been creating our painting, and just back and forth in very gentle strokes. And part of what we're doing when we do this is we're taking that paint that's already in the center and we are pushing it around and into the painting. And we are getting rid of that previous chalk outline and making so that this light burst is actually a part of it and no longer separate from the rest of the canvas. I wasn't actually sure this is going to work, so I'm kind of glad that it does. If your brush starts to feel like it's getting a little bit dry and it's pulling, you know, like it feels like it's sticking to the canvas, you need just little bits more and more of paint as you go. Don't do too much. Make sure that your bristles stay flat, because this is not the time for mixed textures from the brush. You can go back also and you can accentuate spaces that you might not have given too much attention previously. But it is important not to leave gaps. And you can make these strokes as short or as long as you want. You can make them go as far down into the ocean as you want. And if you are going to take them all the way down, make sure that they go off to the edge of your canvas as well. Right. And you can go in and you can make this little area as rounded as you like. I think I will make it a little bit more rounded. So if you can tell, you know, if you look straight at your painting, and even in our original painting, the center that used to be kind of circular is no longer circular. It looks kind of like a bitten cracker at this point. Um, so you can round that out if you want to, but I don't really see that there is a huge point to it. Um, so while this dries, we are going to prepare for the next phase, which is really going to be working with quite a lot of black. Um, if you estimated how much white you were going to use, this would be the time to try to get it back in your bottle, which is probably what I'm going to do. Or you can visit your local 99-cent store or Dollar Tree or whatever, and they have these handy little things. They're just little, super tiny Tupperware. The paint in here has been here probably for about a year and a half, and it is still wet. So these are pretty airtight, and they work wonderfully to preserving color that you can't really get back into the bottle. And you can use it again for your next painting. You will get 12 for $1 at Dollar Tree for these little things. Another really neat idea for keeping your colors separate if you don't like them missing is an ice cube tray. You can pour your paint into an ice cube tray and use it in the separate compartments to keep them from moving around and mingling. So I'm going to very, very outright let you know that I am not a great freehand artist. So I am going to do my best with this, but I make no guarantees that it's going to look great. If you are a freehand artist, I envy you so much, and I wish that I had your talent. So I hope that this turns out for you guys the way that you want it to. Now, I want to advise when using the black, you know, once you get in there, once you get it on there, it's very difficult to get off without having to go back and paint over it later when it dries. I don't want to discourage you from it at all. I just want to let you know it is not my favorite task in the world to do, just because it's a lot more permanent than the other stuff. When you're working with areas of great detail, you want to make sure that your brush really is really wet. You want to make sure that that those bristles are nice and flexible and pliable. So let's see what we can do about making sure that I don't screw this up too bad. So I'm going to take my wet brush. I'm not going to take a tiny brush just yet. I'm using kind of a mid-sized flat brush. Um, and I'm just going to take some paint and kind of pull it out um, and get my bristles, my wet bristles really in there. Because I do want this paint to be thinned out a little bit so that it'll work a little bit more with me. Um, and really just kind of select an area where you want to start. Um, and you can make little hills of coral, you know, that are not particularly even. And you do want to make sure that you paint out over the edge. You can make little rocks. And really what you're doing is you're painting shadows. And the reason I say that you can use color to do these is if you have the time to color all of these, it could be very, very colorful and beautiful. You can also shade out, which I might try a little bit later, because you do have some beautiful light coming through. So you could potentially be able to see hints and colors reflected um, in the water from whatever is down below. And I don't like this brush, so I'm going to get a different brush. I'm going to use a small flat end. And you want to make sure that the canvas that you're painting on, that the area of the canvas that you're painting on is 100% dry. Otherwise, this is just going to start trying to scrape the paint off. Just making kind of a little rock bed here. And I did see some lovely sea ferns that I think I'd like to try to do. So I'm going to start that just by kind of defining the long stem first. And I'm going to do quite a few of those. And then all you really have to do is start from the bottom and go upward and just add your leaves without connecting. You can make them more populated if you want to, or you can go and you can put more leaves on them. At this point, this is up to your imagination. your vision of how you want this painting to turn out. Okay. I think I'm just going to kind of go back and make some of my leaves a little bit larger and more defined. I did have a question earlier this week on my Facebook about brushes. You know, what brushes are great to purchase for this kind of thing. And it all really kind of depends on um, what your comfort levels are. Um, Michaels has a really wide assortment of brushes that are good for lots of different kinds of medium. A multi-purpose set will give you about 10 brushes. Most places will sell you sets of brushes for a pretty decent price, even online. I'll post a link to something later today. But the lady that was asking me was actually asking about brushes that are child appropriate. And I did want to let you know that I did find some brushes that are more child appropriate than the normal brush. We have some. I did find these brushes and I bought them for my niece a couple of years ago. But these brushes are triangular. Um, and just like how you can buy a triangular pencil to help your child write a little bit more to get better placement, more comfortable, you can get triangular handled brushes if those are more comfortable for you or your child. And I think that they are very appropriate for a young painter. Um, and I found those at Walmart, and I think they were only about $3. So definitely look around, see what works best for you. They have brushes with rubber handles. If you have a need for like a comfort grip, they've got long brushes, short brushes, all kinds of different stuff. Just play around with the brushes and find something that you like. So now that the leaves are on, I'm going to kind of go back and very carefully connect them to the stem. And that's our first sea fern. Um, so now, since I'm going to need some time for it to dry, I am going to get brave and start the body of my turtle. Um, so I'm going to start with just kind of an oval shape right about where I want him. I'm not gonna lie, this part has me very nervous because I have never even drawn a turtle before. So I hope that it turns out okay. I don't really want him to look like an egg, you know, but I do want a nice rounded oval shape. I'm going to leave that alone. I'm going to let Yertle dry, and then we'll come back to him in just a few minutes. So I'm going to do a little bit of rock bed down here at the bottom. And I'm just going to kind of outline it first. I guess not really rock bed, you know, but, you know, ocean bottom. I'm going to hang her up here. A bit of rock coral. I'm going to do a little bit of stuff up here too. And mostly I'm just kind of reserving space for more of that rock and vegetation that we have going on in this painting. Now that I've got some idea of where I want some of that to go, I'm going to take a little bit of a larger brush just to save on time. And just get those spaces filled out. Ugh, it's a very hard brush. I don't want to use that. If your brush is like super hard, It is not likely meant for acrylic paint. It might be meant for a slightly rougher medium. If you wet it down really, really well and kind of like snap the bristles a little bit, it'll get some of those starches out, and it'll become a little bit more pliable for you. And you can use as big or as small a canvas as you want. The smaller canvas is going to make you be a little bit more judicious about your space, but it's also going to be a lot easier to fill in the spaces. Um, so it's up to your discretion how you want to do this. And the reason I'm doing this now is because it is really, really difficult for you to paint details when your canvas could move. So I figured getting this black end at the bottom taken care of to give it enough time to dry on the bottom is going to ensure that you have plenty of time to work on your details as you see fit. All that noise that you hear in the back is Bunny chasing something outside through the windows. It could be her tail, who knows? And while your lines don't have to be straight, they should probably be as clean as possible so that you can have that clear outline of shadow. Now we're on our second pass here with this particular area. I'm going to kind of make it a little bumpy. All right, and now we can let that part of it dry a bit. And we can continue kind of laying out space and figuring out what we want to do with the rest of our ocean bottom. just kind of keep going. I am out of black, so I'm going to take a little bit more. And one of the things that we can do also is we can add just kind of like seagrass and weeds. I'm going to turn this so that I can see what I'm doing a bit here. But I just need to kind of like paint this out. I'm going to just keep reserving space. I think this is probably the more tedious part of it, is just kind of figuring out where you're going to put everything. But once you have this space figured out, you can kind of do whatever you want with it, and that's a little bit more fun to do. more bump here. Oops, but make sure that bottom is really nice and dry before we set it back down to get our detailing done. I'm going to kind of stand here and try to figure out if I've got my whole top painted. There we go. So we're going to let that dry a little bit before we start getting into more of our details. And since I've got a little bit of time, we're going to go back and play with Yertle. So I'm going to make sure that my bristles are nice and soft. Get into that. And make sure that my brush is nice and flat. I'm going to kind of make one kind of like that. Excuse me. And we've got a little tail. And we're going to carefully try and get his head on. That's not too bad. I can go back in there and get the rest of his little flipper on. One of the things that you can do to kind of cheat on this part is if you have a printer at home, or if you feel better about drawing it than painting it, draw it, cut it out, and make yourself a stencil. I have done that before with hummingbirds, and it is very effective and nerve saving. That's not too bad. And we'll just kind of finish off his little legs. Like so. Just kind of define his head a bit. Not too bad at all. Better than I expected for myself. So now we can kind of continue with our plant life a little bit and get this painting finished up. I think we're going a little bit longer than any of us wanted to be painting today. So we're going to kind of make a branch here. that. This is just kind of a plant that I see in the original painting that I thought looks kind of neat. It looks kind of like a little underwater tree. Right? Could be, yeah. Alright, I'm pretty dry, so I'm going to go ahead and place this back on the bottom and hope that I wasn't wrong. And now we can just kind of put in our details however we want. Yeah, a little bit of seaweed. You want to make sure that you've got plenty of paint on your brush when you do this, because you don't really want to go over it a bunch of different times, because then it'll just start scraping the paint off. And these little plants and details are actually going to make everything come together real nice. The more I look at that little turtle, the more he's growing on me. So like I always say, if you don't like it, keep going. Leave it alone for a little while. Maybe it'll grow on you the way that it is. And that might take a couple of days. If you don't like it, paint over it and try it again tomorrow. Or paint something different. I'm going to try another one of these little ferns. I like to lean my pinky against the side of the canvas in order to keep my balance and keep my strokes clean, but I can't do that because that part of the canvas is still wet. And once anything that you've done is dry, you can go back and you can touch it up fairly easily, but you just want to make sure that your strokes are nice and soft and gentle. And then just connect your little fronds. You're all set. Another thing that you can do if you don't really want to use the brush to do this is you can use your paint pens if you have any of them. Paint pens are a really, really good solution to drawing detailed things when you don't really feel confident about using your brush. A little mollusk here. And you can put as little or as much as you want into this. Honestly, in this part of the video, you could probably stop watching if you wanted to. This is just all going to be detail work. Um, but just kind of give yourself the time that you want or that you need to complete it. You don't actually have to finish it today if you don't want to. If you feel like you need a break and you can finish this tomorrow, definitely do that. Um, you might get another idea about what you'd like to add to your painting. Um, so definitely make sure that the pace of the painting is good for you um, and that you feel good and relaxed. There is nothing about this project that is worth stressing out over. And even if you do decide that you want to do this tomorrow or sometime next week, um, you can PM me your questions and I will try to answer them as much as possible um, to help you get through your own little masterpiece. One of the things that I've been doing during this time of quarantine um, is I've been dreaming up dream vacations. And I think more so now with this little painting, um, scuba diving is really on that list. Um, somewhere with uh, lots of beauty underwater. Or above water if I chicken out and decide that all I really want to do is sip lemonade on the beach. That'll work too. Really, honestly, right now, I would settle for a trip to SeaWorld. Maybe next time I'm down in the valley visiting. So because I'm working kind of in a circular view, I am actually going to take this canvas and I'm going to turn it up on its head so that I can work on those details on the bottom a little bit easier. And it should be nice and dry because we kind of set that up a little bit, quite a little bit ago. Maybe one little right there. Make sure you get your seaweeds in there. Not a lot left to go, but we're doing pretty good. And you can be as methodical as you want about this as well. If you really like doing everything of one first and then moving on to the other, you can do that as well. This painting does allow for a lot of freedom for pace and for colors um, and textures. So definitely make this your own if you have the opportunity. I think this painting would just look beautiful in pinks and oranges. I do want to take a minute to plug my friend Michelle Thompson, who is the owner of Free to Be Art here in Milwaukee. If you ever wanted to support a local business and artist, she is the artist that got me started on painting. And she is doing online classes just like me. She charges $10 for access to the class. And she is excellent. And she is doing some amazing, amazing paintings. Um, and I can't recommend her enough. I'll probably be doing a couple of them myself once I get this workspace a little bit more situated. But I can't recommend her enough. Michelle Thompson, Free to Be Art. Just pull it up. I will put a link in the feed later today. And I did have a plug for her earlier this week. So just look for that in my timeline. Maybe Daryl will post it for me. Forgot to connect my leaves. Mm, Here we go. And you can use a smaller brush for these as well if you feel like um, the details should be more minute, or if you're using a smaller canvas, um, it might make you feel a little bit more comfortable to use a smaller brush. gosh, it's getting kind of loaded. When your brush is loaded, that means that it's really fat with paint. And a loaded brush can start making lines that would otherwise be nice and clean, really thick, and not very clean at all. So if you're ever wondering how come your lines don't look as clean as you were hoping, it might be that your brush is just loaded and needs a quick wash. And the angle that you're at for your painting can also um, affect, because your hand position is very important. So if you need to turn your canvas into a different direction so that you can reach that more comfortably, definitely do. Upside down, sideways, whatever it takes. Alright. One more little fern and we'll be all done, I think. At least I will. I think I'll be happy with how this has turned out. Earlier this week, actually I think last week, I posted a nice long list of materials that you can order um, if you want to continue. I did have a look at Michael's earlier this week, and it does look that they are restocked, at least in the Pacific Northwest, for a lot of painting materials that were out of stock, even for shipping. So definitely have a look. They've got a great coupon for 20% off of everything, on top of other sales that they've got going. So have a look. If you are not adverse to ordering from Amazon, Amazon has Liquitex acrylic paints actually for a very decent price. It's actually better than what Amazon is offering right now, even with the coupon. But there's a lot of stress going on with Amazon right now. So shop according to your conscience. And be advised that it will, even if you have Amazon Prime, it will likely take at least 2 to 3 times longer for you to get what you want, even with Amazon Prime. For I would say probably 5 to 10 days on anything that is non-essential. All right. And I think I'm happy with this painting as it is, so I am going to leave it alone. If I decide I want to add more to it, I can come back to it another day. But I'm pretty happy with it as it is. I'm going to go ahead and turn it right side up. Go. And not exactly like our inspiration painting, but pretty close. Um, nice and plagiarized, right? Um, thank you to whoever painted this original painting. I am sorry that I stole your painting, borrowed your painting, but it is beautiful and it has inspired us today. I'm going to go ahead and take my paint pen and I'm just going to sign off my project. Right here in the corner as usual. And then today's date is 4/18. And I do wanted to let you know, today is the anniversary of my first ever solo project where I was 100% pleased with it. Today is 1 year since I painted my my blue freesia, not freesia, my blue wisteria. And it is my favorite painting of all of the paintings that I have ever done. Chris's favorite as well, actually, and he will not let me do anything with it but keep it. Um, I will probably be doing that wisteria tree sometime here in the next couple of weeks, maybe in a different color, but if you would like to join on that, I will post it here pretty soon. Um, so now that our painting is finished, I want to just say thank you for joining me today. I'm so happy that you decided to, and I hope that I will see you again. Have a good evening. I love you, and take care of yourselves.